Thank you, Alexander. So I would say hello again. I think some of you, maybe most of you, have seen me this morning moderating the first few sessions. And now I can say welcome to the last talk of the day. And we have heard, I have to say, really amazing and inspiring stories and so many practical takeaways. And I have been truly inspired. And now with this last talk, we will share what happens when we design together, the power of collaboration. And many previous talks touched on the topic, and we will specifically talk about the value that our different perspectives bring to the design process. And we have a diverse team collaborating to bring you this talk.
Hey everyone, my name is Ammara. I'm a lead business analyst here at Thoughtworks, and I have about a decade of experience in building products collaboratively.
Hi everyone, I'm James, a software developer at Thoughtworks, coming to you from the London office, live and in person.
Yes, and me, Sabrina, head of design at Thoughtworks. I'm still in Berlin, haven't moved since this morning, and I'm still passionate about creating valuable experiences for people. But before we jump into talking about designing together, let's talk about what we think design actually is. I think we use the term quite a lot throughout the day. And my question is, and people sometimes ask me, is design really the responsibility of one person? Is it the job title of someone? Is it about drawing or making something look pretty? And you are probably guessing I'm asking the question, so there's much more to it. And really, everyone designs. My favorite definition of design comes from a person called Herb Simon, a pioneer in many different scientific domains. And one of them is artificial intelligence, where he did a lot of work on human reasoning and decision-making and laid the foundations for the field. So truly amazing person. And he described the definition of design in his book, The Sciences of the Artificial, in 1967. So a long time ago, but it's still relevant today and still my favorite definition. And Herb said that everyone designs who devises a course of action aimed at changing existing situations into preferred ones. So what this really means is that if we're defining steps to improve the current situation, so now we see a problem, we want to make it better, and if we devise a course of action and make a plan, then we are designing. Whether we're designing software or spreadsheets or an experience for our customer, we are all designers. But why is good design important? Because good design is good for business. And people are happy to pay more money for a great customer experience and for products that really help them to achieve their aspirations. And there's also some really nice data on the positive business impact of design. This statistic is from the UK, where for every pound invested, a business will see an increase of £4 of their net operating profit. That's amazing, right? So it's really a no-brainer that design is important, but good design is hard.
We suggest that the best design happens when we create things together, when we bring different perspectives together. And we think good design happens at the intersection of three perspectives: people, business, and technology. We always need to start with people. What do they want? What do they need? How can they use that and access that? And from there, we get to viability, because we're driven by ambitious business objectives. Can we do this? But we also need to know that what we want to do is technologically feasible. Can it be made? And if these three criteria work together, we create impact. And not only financially, we need to think about emotional response. It's important that we're socially responsible too, because good design improves our culture and the world we live in. So to us, good design is really the result of partnership and collaboration.
So I love having, I think we've seen similar Venn diagrams today. And when I look at it and view this from the perspective of an experienced designer that I bring to a team is that for me, the design part that I bring to that collaboration is really about being intentional about meeting user needs. Makes sense, right? And I think about the context of the person, how the product we design fits into their life, and how it supports what people are actually trying to do. I consider the process, the steps and flow to ensure that they actually make sense to people. And I also think about the amount of information we want to show people, when and where, to make sure that they're aware of the right information at the right time so they can make decisions and know what they need to do next. So these are some of the things that I consider as part of the user experience lens. How about you, Ammara? What design perspective do you bring to the team?
Thanks for asking. It's really important to consider design and think about the different possibilities and customer needs. But as a business analyst, additionally, I'm asking what is financially viable? What is achievable in the time frame that we have? What's a good first cut of the product, or MVP, that is minimum viable product? What is the hypothesis that we really want to test? I'm also always asking what is our product strategy and the business strategy? All these parameters together with design help me define the viable value of the product. And that's what I'm asking as a business analyst. What about you, James?
Well, as a developer, Ammara, I bring a technical perspective. So I think a lot about feasibility. And feasible means, can it be made? What are we making it out of? It is, in a sense, a material question. So if someone says, we need to make a bridge, I'm going to tell you, as someone who supposedly knows about the technology of making bridges, how these bricks or whatever we're going to use, whether they're going to work for this length of span. Maybe we're going to need steel reinforced concrete. Here are its tolerances, its material characteristics. Maybe I'll conclude this is the kind of bridge you can make out of these materials. And by analogy, if we're making a page on a website, we want everything to load instantly. But maybe I'm going to say, no way, this thing here relies on an asynchronous process, and there's a message queue here, and 3 separate applications need to respond to produce this thing here. It's going to take, 5 seconds, not 500 milliseconds. So our bridges are going to fall down unless we think about X and Y. And that usually means learning more about the constraints, so we know what kind of technical approach is going to fit.
And it is so important to hear your perspectives and actually also the different perspectives on the team. And we've only talked about 3 perspectives here so far, but there are many more perspectives on the team. We have subject matter experts, QAs, or supporting functions within the business, like finance or legal, who bring different perspectives together that help us to define the constraints for our design. So before we continue, I'm really curious. We had a few polls throughout the day, and I would love to throw another one at you. My question is not about which role do you have, but really what is your perspective? Which kinds of questions do you find yourself asking? Are you asking yourself questions around what do people need or desire? Do they understand how to use the thing we're making? Do you think more about what can be financially be viable, or the technical perspective around what is technically feasible? How can we build it?
The winner so far.
I think Alexander has the power to release the poll.
Yeah.
Not bad. Lots of people in a combination. I'm really impressed, I have to say. Not bad. Still, for everyone who selected just one of the options, that's also really great, because if we're in a multidisciplinary team, we can build on those individual perspectives that we bring to. Wonderful. So then I will move to the next part. And really, I have to say, us as presenters, we do have this warm, fuzzy feeling that amazing things happen when we collaborate together. And the question is, do you have this warm, fuzzy feeling, right? And you may be thinking, really, how does this actually work? I mean, okay, we had a few examples throughout the day. And I think Ammara brought us another one to really bring this to life.
I did. I brought an example with me, and it's quite a classic example. It is indicative of a situation we very often find ourselves in. So think of client requirements along the lines of, hey, can you help us improve the quality of our elevator suite? Now, I know what you're thinking. As software and product developers, nobody's asking us to work with elevators. We don't work with elevators. But we can all agree with statements like, can you help us improve the quality of a solution, or XYZ is a pretty common request. And so for the scope of this example, let's pretend we've been asked to improve the quality of an elevator. And as we all know, we've all been in this situation where a request like improve the quality of an elevator also comes with a solution request. How about we replace our elevators with, say, a glass elevator? Or even more common buzzwords like digitalization and IoT make an appearance. A digital solution, a swanky touchscreen. This has bound to improve the quality of our elevator. Alternatively, from a tech perspective, the elevator problem is actually one of the more classic ones. There's a constant innovation in the algorithms that make the movement of the elevator faster or more synchronous, and how often we are given a problem with an inherent tech solution, and if you implement this technology, it's going to make a better quality of the solution. Yeah, we've all been there. The question though is, what really is the quality of an elevator? This is where we start to think design. Design is about finding out who we are improving the quality of the elevator for. Who is the solution for? For some, elevators are crowded. They're difficult to use. Or for others, they're not very intuitive. We spend a lot of time trying to find what button to press. For others, elevators are claustrophobic. Or maybe we are very fancy. For us, quality could be the ability to kick back, sit down, and have a drink while we go up to the 100th floor corner suite office, and that is quality for us. In this case, it turned out that for elevators, claustrophobia is the biggest, most common problem. It is less a physical problem and more a psychological one. When you put people in a metal container over a long period of time, they're gonna think about all the possibilities of everything that could go wrong. And studies have actually found that the solution is neither digital nor IoT, but more about distracting people from their situation. So that annoying elevator music you hear, or a mirror which makes you feel like there's more depth, that's actually design. That's good design right there. Design is about taking a step back before jumping into solutioning mode. And that really is the crux of good design. Reframe the problem. In our example, we started with a possibilities, a whole world of solutions, but we didn't know what the problem was. So what really was the problem? It was that the wait is annoying. And you have to make them feel like the wait is shorter. And we can do this by putting up mirrors or playing music. And together we choose a solution on what's viable with the other constraints we have. For example, you have time constraints, resource constraints, budget constraints. For example, even if you have a low budget, you could still improve the quality of the elevator with a simple solution. So decrease the waiting time by introducing a mirror or like a hand sanitizer. And think about that. With mirrors, we gave rise to the famous mirror selfies. And look what good design does. Reframing the problem is the key to good design. But getting to the point where we are able to reframe the problem is super hard. We can't do this alone, and it involves collaboration, and it is complex. It's a tangle.
That's right, Ammara. Collaboration is so important, but it can be really complex, right? It can feel overwhelming. The problem spaces we inhabit are complex. The tools we use are complex. Complexity itself is complex. We encounter it in many forms. And this part of the talk, I want to talk precisely about this to suggest that complexity is what design is all about. Design is about tackling complexity. As with most of what I'm going to talk about in this section of our talk, this insight is not original to me. Most famously, perhaps, it's the idea that motivates the approach of domain-driven design, whose purpose we're reminded by the cover of the book, is tackling complexity in the heart of software. The contention being that complexity is kind of the deepest problem that we have in software development. I want to suggest that when we encounter complexity, we are doing design, or we are at least thinking about it. We might be appreciating design. And whether we're composing or playing or listening to music, painting, building bridges, or programming, if we have a design for something or design on something, we're modeling an approach to negotiating with the complexity of a problem space to try and resolve it into something manageable, comprehensible, tractable. The activity of design is central to the negotiation of complexity. So what is it that we're exactly trying to do when we take on complexity, and by extension when we're thinking about doing design? The way I think about it, and I think about this as much as a former researcher and writer about cultural history, which was my previous career, as I do now as a self-taught programmer, we're trying to understand better how things work, how things fit together, sometimes very disparate things. During Apple's golden age, Steve Jobs famously said that most people make the mistake of thinking design is what it looks like. People think it's this veneer that the designers are handed this box and told, make it look good. That's not what we think design is. It's not just what it looks and feels like. Design is how it works. Design is how it works. And one of the best ways of understanding how something works is by taking it apart and then putting it back together again. You learn so much by doing both of those things, and I think it's characteristic of what we all do when we're approaching a problem in our different roles. We analyze in our different ways, then we synthesize. And this is how Rich Hickey, the author of the Clojure programming language and a pretty sharp mind, dare I say, a leading philosopher about software, tends to think about what he does. And the unique value of what he does is design. That's fundamentally what design is about, he says, taking things apart so you can put them back together. It's how you understand what you're doing, how what you're doing works, and whether it's the right way or the wrong way to be going about something. You keep doing it over and over again to keep breaking things apart, trying to put them back together again. That's how you learn about what you're making and how well designed it is, how well it models a problem space and affords a solution. And I think Hickey is of the opinion that design is highly underrated in software development. I think part of this is a very reasonable backlash to these sort of overblown forms of upfront design that have doomed so many software projects that never get out of the requirements and specification phase to actually get software into the hands of users. And you know the users are the ones who ultimately decide whether your design is any good. So they need to be present in the conversation. Design involves continual practice. It can't be a one-off exercise. And Stanford's John Osterhout, a computer scientist, has said he wants to correct this deficit. Most prominently in his recent book, A Philosophy of Software Design. And the cover shows what good design can do. It can resolve that marvelous tangle of complexity into simple things. And the book opens with a sort of foundational claim that the most fundamental problem in computer science is problem decomposition. How to take a complex problem and divide it up into pieces that can be solved independently. He thinks of this as a design task. He says, problem decomposition is the central design task that programmers face every day. And more than that, he claims that design skill is what separates great programmers from average ones. Yet he observes that he's not been able to identify a single class in any university where problem decomposition is an essential topic. In other words, we don't really pay enough attention to something that is also the most important thing we do. And it's what separates great work from average work. So we might ask why? Why do we avoid thinking so deeply about design? And of course, there are many reasons, but one of them, which maybe sounds completely obvious, but shouldn't be overlooked, I think, is just that it's hard. And I love this. This is something that President Obama had on his desk, a little plaque that said this to remind him of this basic truth. Hard things are hard. And that's the point. If it was easy to be doing it, it would be an easy problem. If it's hard to do. And I guess when you're the president, there aren't many easy problems left to reach you. I don't think this plaque is there in the White House anymore. I think they've stopped working on hard things over there these days. It's bad enough for hard things to be hard. It's also hard to tell whether you're working hard enough on the right hard things. How do we know what are the most important problems to work on? And this is where we really need help from other people to get out of our silos. So to return to Rich Hickey, he has this great visualization about how he thinks about the relative importance and the difficulty of the various problems we encounter in programming. So down there at the bottom of this inverted pyramid, we've got this little box for typos, trivial, obvious problems. You can just go in and fix these. And inconsistencies, maybe you can cross-reference the way something works over there to make this more like that, and that's easy to deal with. They're easy and often rewarding, immediate gratification. But you can go an order of magnitude up, and the bar starts getting longer. You know, difficult things like resource utilization and concurrency. There's more to do here, and they're harder problems. And they're the kind of problems that programmers love to get stuck on because they're hard to think about, and there's a big reward for being solved, and you can feel kind of smart working on them. You can think about threads and clever algorithms for parallel processing and so on. But you need to climb right to the top of that section and go another 10x up to the really hard problems, the complexity of the domain. Understanding deeply where we are, what we're doing, why we're doing it, and fighting all the time fundamentally against misconceiving what we're up to. Those are the hardest problems. And the way I think about this diagram in the context of what we're talking about today is that I need to get pulled up this pyramid. I'm always going to hover down the bottom, especially in the typos, which is something I love to fix. But for the real value, I need to get pulled right up to the top of the pyramid and get to the really hard problems. It's kind of a mountain with a lot of steps. I need to get out of my programmer's mindset to really start engaging in the most valuable kind of activity I could be doing, which is making sure we're working on the right problem, that we've pulled it apart and put it back together enough to know that this is the best thing we could be doing, that we're thinking about it in the best way. And we need to ask ourselves, do we have enough interdisciplinary knowledge about our problems and their contexts? This is the kind of knowledge we only get from the constant iterative cycle of analysis and synthesis, when we get a whole team collaborating, experimenting, discovering, and learning. Because it's just, I say this in closing, it's not just about being quote unquote smart and solving problems. What's really valuable, as Ammara has already said in another way, is finding the right problem. Not exactly a different one, but just a better version of the problem. And this isn't really a way of thinking that we're conditioned into. We prize problem solvers, people who get things done, people with a bias towards action. But then we have to ask, what problems are these people solving? What are they doing? How much have they thought about it? We've come to learn to our cost that often the smartest people in the room are off making some huge mistake somewhere, like inventing financial derivatives or undermining global democracy with some clever algorithms. Because as the inventor Alan Kay says, most people are rewarded in school for solving problems. But when was the last time your child or you were rewarded for finding a problem? He says we're normally put off because people say, we've got enough problems already, we don't need another one. But finding the right problems is really what it's all about, because the energy and ingenuity that's needed to solve the problem, to do the work that's demanded, is a really precious resource. It's kind of the last thing you do after you've taken everything apart and back together and convinced yourself it's really the one that needs solving. And this is one of his sayings, don't take this too literally, but he says, you know, point of view is worth 80 IQ points. Making progress on something hard is not about thinking you're right, shoot first, think later. Don't worry about being smart, worry about having the right point of view. That's how you make cognitive leaps, that's how you make real progress. And for me anyway, I'm pushed into that from collaborating with a diverse, multidisciplinary team, from seeing the world through someone else's eyes.
James, I'm amazed every time again when I hear this insight, and I think it's my favorite insight so far. But I think we have heard a lot of interesting points in this presentation. I started by saying we are all designers, right? Whether we design a spreadsheet or software. And then Ammara talked about that great design really happens when we frame the right problem. And James, you summarized now and talked about that design really helps us to tackle complexity and that we make cognitive leaps when we design together. So now the question really is, yes, how can we make those cognitive leaps together as a team? It is not enough to just put people in a room and hope that they will collaborate. We need techniques to facilitate this, right? And we heard many great examples during this presentation today, or already, not this presentation, but this conference. We heard about the possibility of creating flexible teams, or the true dual track agile method, or just writing user stories in a language that everyone can understand. But I also left the product discovery with the developers and just getting them to come along to observe interviews, right? We've heard many fascinating techniques, and we have brought another technique that you can use to encourage interdisciplinary collaboration. And this is also a technique that you can use with your team tomorrow to make cognitive leaps together and create great design together. So this is what I did in a recent engagement for a mobility company. As a team, we faced the following challenge. How might a single sign-on feature work for customers that brings together multiple different mobility accounts into one? And this was a completely new feature. We needed to define what functionality would go in, how would the journey flow, and how do the different elements actually connect meaningfully together. So instead of locking myself in a room or putting on headphones and hiding behind my computer screen, I decided to run a 90-minute design studio workshop. And it is a fast-paced format that is a really great way to get different people and perspectives to collaborate together. And it cuts out team dynamics and really gives everyone a voice to share their ideas. And as you expected, I invited lots of different people to it. Product owner, business analysts, developers, and subject matter experts, and myself. I was there too. And the session had 5 parts where we went through divergent and convergent thinking. So we explored first many different options before we narrowed down on one solution. And step 1, we started together to align on a common understanding. What is the problem that we're seeking to solve today? And what are actually the constraints and assumptions that each of us had? That was the foundation for the session. And then with step 2, the fast-paced collaboration started. Individually, each of us sketched 8 ideas in 8 minutes. That helped us to not procrastinate, but just get things on paper. We shared the ideas with the team, then went into round 3. Again, individually, each of us now had 5 minutes and go deeper into one idea. We shared again. But now what we did was we put up all the different sketches that people have come up with. And you can see there were, just boxes and arrows and stick figures, and put them on the wall and dot voted to prioritize what are the ideas that most resonate with us, what might be the best solution, what is something we might want to try out first. And in the last round, we spent 10 minutes together and created one idea as a team based on the prioritized ideas that we had hanging on the wall. And at the end of the 90 minutes session, we had generated more ideas together than I could have come up with alone. And the team was aligned, and we had a really clear, defined problem space and a shared vision for how we actually want to move forward. And we also had our solution hypothesis. The idea we would test first to see, does this answer the need for users? So this helped us to move forward quickly and saved lots of time and communication. And in case our solution hypothesis didn't work, we had a full backlog of more ideas that we created that we could try out as a next step. So now you might think, okay, this sounds interesting, and I kind of see how I could use this for a design challenge. But you can actually organize a design studio workshop yourself, whether it is a technology challenge, a business challenge, or how to design something for people.
Interesting that you mentioned this, Sabrina. I actually learned about the design studio from you, and while we were putting this talk together a couple of months ago, and I recently had the chance to organize this design studio with my client team. And this is a pharmaceutical company, and they work on the drug development process. So in order to prove that a drug is safe, a lot of tests have to be performed. And as you can imagine, the quantity of data that they produce on a daily basis is huge. So the client was looking at all this data, and it was really difficult for them to understand. They made the assumption that if only we could make this data more visual, it would be more comprehensible. How many times have we actually heard that before? We need to build a dashboard for the data. So for 4 years, this client worked on different visualizations that could be easily understood by people in different departments, different scientists. And this, as you can imagine, was obviously very, very hard. So as we were building possible solutions together, we were totally lost. We are not sure where to go at all. So we decided to take a step back and relook at the problem we were solving. And together we did this with the design studio. And as we went through the different design studio rounds and we kept proposing different solutions, the fast-paced nature, the collaborative nature of it, it became more and more obvious that the problem needed reframing. We were not sure about what the problem was. And all our different perspectives helped us together. And we realized that, yes, we needed to visualize data, but also primarily we were trying to answer one question. Has a certain test been conducted before? If yes, can we reuse their data? And now the visualization would help the scientists understand the data. So from a business perspective, by not doing a single test again, like if a test has been done before and we don't have to repeat it, it could save them up to $7,000 per test. And pharmaceutical companies, they conduct thousands of such tests every day. So for this client and for their problem, the real problem was we need to find the tests. And this shifted the focus drastically. Now, half the effort was on finding the test results. The design studio brought to the surface the hidden assumption that was actually preventing the client from the ability to even frame the problem in the right way. We were so convinced that it was all about visualization that we were not even able to see the problem anymore. And so when we came together with all our different perspectives, with our different hats, as designers, as developers, as business analysts, as subject matter experts, with the users, together we took the problem apart in this design studio, and we came up with a better version of the problem, and as such, a better solution.
So we have shown today that design, well, great design happens when we design together. And actually, we didn't just see this in our presentation today, but also really in all the different talks that we've heard throughout the day today. And really, this means that good design is also the responsibility of everyone in the team. And within our process, different people may lead at different times as part of that process, but it is our responsibility to reach out to colleagues and to include their perspective and make sure that we reach the best outcomes together and collaborate continuously together. And one of our colleagues at Thoughtworks found from some research data that multidisciplinary collaboration helps us to get 30% faster to market. And that we also see a 15% accelerated adoption rate. So the outcomes are amazing when we collaborate together in our team and avoid working alone on a task. And we are able to make cognitive leaps when we include the perspectives of others. So finally, I have one ask. Well, actually, I'm maybe a bit cheeky. It's actually really 3 asks, depending on how you look at it. And the ask is,
connect in your team tomorrow. Reach out to your other roles. Find out about their perspectives, the knowledge and experience that they bring to the team.
Amplify. Share your support to the different perspectives in your team. Use your voice to make theirs stronger and increase their impact.
And finally, collaborate. Even when we have a cross-functional team, it's easy to get sucked into the task and get bogged down by delivery pressure. And then we might think it's just faster to quickly do it alone. But that's a fallacy. Only by slowing down and embracing different perspectives and bringing everyone along do we really get to the desired outcomes. So don't rush ahead alone, collaborate. Now, we would like to say thank you and are really curious about the kinds of questions that you may have for us.
Thank you very much, Sabrina, James, and Ammara, for sharing your perspective and your insights. I really loved that one. How we mingled through the day and now we split it up once more and we showed once more how this collaboration can look in detail and how different roles and heads can just add to that conversation. So the Q&A is below. There's some elements coming in there now already. If you have more questions, shoot them in here. There are two more fun questions. One is like really, James, somebody's asking for your Twitter handle. Do you have Twitter? Are you on Twitter?
I'm afraid I'm not, no.
Not on Twitter. So Matthias, sorry, no Twitter handle here. And the other one is really like, what's the red button on Obama's desk? So not the sign, but the red button. Do you know that one?
Bring me a can of Coke, I think.
I think Trump ordered a Coke and Obama ordered tea.
Yeah. That's
very nice. So like looking at a more concrete element in there, on also thinking about tomorrow, and there's one question in there in the Q&A already, that's more like very hands-on. When you collaborate tomorrow on a user story together, how would that look like?
I could take that, certainly from a technical point of view, because I think one of the questions that often comes up is, okay, this is all very well, this collaboration, but if you say you're working on something very technical, how would you really involve a designer in that? How would it add value? And I think the point that I guess we're all converging on is this idea that having a design mindset is something that enables collaborative conversations to happen. So I would imagine that as a developer, if I'm working on something highly technical, let's say something that involves an architected diagram, lots of boxes and data flows and arrows and lines going between things, even though that's not a design task from an experienced designer's point of view, the kinds of questions that I can be asked about that and prompted into giving explanations of my thought process can be so incredibly valuable, even if the technical, even if the technical perspective is not coming from that collaborator, it can start the kind of conversation that helps me into the process of decomposing the problem, re-articulating the problem. And it's not just the usual thing of, talking something through is helpful. If you're bringing into a conversation a very design-focused problem decomposition mindset, the value of that is huge. And I've been lucky enough to work on a team with Ammara and Sabrina, a previous client, and these were the kind of conversations that we always try to prioritize, and it works really well.
Does somebody of you still want to add anything, or shall we move to the next one? Sabrina, Ammara, anything to add? No, you're fine in there. Then the other question is, like, we already talked about different elements in there and like what a designer is really like adding in terms of skills and mindset, and that goes beyond the visual mindset. And I think it's even not just what a designer brings to the team, but like also what a developer and a business analyst and other roles bring as design mindset to a team. Could you elaborate a little bit more on those elements in there, like what skills and mindsets there is once more, what the different people can bring about? I think it was already in the talk at many different points, but maybe you can just like re-elaborate on that one.
Yeah, I'm happy to take this one. I think we had the oft used Venn diagram earlier, showing the different perspectives where as a designer we focus on, okay, what is important for people, and the BA really thinking what's important for the business, and as a developer really thinking about the technology. And I think I really loved James's example with the pyramid that you had around being sucked into the detail at the bottom of the pyramid, but really needing also your teams and your colleagues to kind of pull you back up the pyramid. And I think that's something that the different perspectives, whether one is an experienced designer or a business-focused person, that's the value that we bring there. And if we think back to Herb Simon, we are all designers, right? And if we think about what does an experienced designer bring, it's really making sure that when we're defining what problem do we want to solve, is that we're looking at the human perspective. So it goes away from just visual, designing nice dashboard, like Ammara said in her example, but thinking back to what problem are we solving for the customer or for the user, and how does the product need to work to support the goal that the user has? And I think that's really, in the essence, what design brings. And I think, James, you also had a nice quote from Steve Jobs around design is how it works. And I think that really also brings it to the point. And I'm also thinking back to Claire's nice example this morning around how hardware that was like soldered together on a piece of board actually affects the user experience. And bringing all that together is really where a lot of value lies, and where, yeah, we see the power of collaboration. I don't know, Ammara, James, would you like to add something?
I think when it comes to key skill sets, which is what the question that I also see, the designer on my team is an excellent interviewer. And when we are interviewing users, so we usually pair on it. So either it's like the product owner with the designer or the developer with the designer. And it's super interesting to really draw out the information as well. And it's these multiple perspectives when we are asking the user. So would you prefer to do it this way or that way is one way, but how often do you do it in a day? And which technology are you using currently? And if I change this, and sometimes it's about which direction you sometimes test the user with as well. And it's really fun to pair as well because you're bouncing off multiple ideas, and it gives the end user also an idea to think about in multiple perspectives. And it's not just the user, but also sometimes just pairing on interviewing lines of question with your product owner, with the business owners, with the management. What are you trying to build? So it's all these different skill sets and how you're conversing and talking as well.
Nice. Thank you very much, Ammara, James, and Sabrina, for wrapping that up.